Cody. Come on, man. Cody is the new black ball. Everybody try to get Cody and get him in the pocket.
Okay, wait, so wait.
Oh!
Oh, wait, so it's a CC.
All like, oh,
Logan,
missed.
so it's CR.
Oh, wait, Cody's still in. Cody's still in, great. So now I got a bigger target on my back.
I just tried to get the
Get it in. Yes. Oh, you lucky boy.
Come on. Wait.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
CRU.
So you can throw those in frustration.
Logan, that's CR for you. CRU.
CRU for you.
Substitute that ball for a plastic ball and you're trying to hit the butt. Oh, look at you standing. You won't move. That's good.
Wait, how are we doing?
Yay, good job. Yay. Alright, cool. You're such a good girl. That was good. You took another step. Yay. Good job. Yeah, that was a good step.
Oh, I almost broke my finger trying to hit the ball.
Oh, Logan, you got it, you got it.
Cody.
By the way, interference is a letter in Alex's deck.
Oh!
Yeah, you were
Alex
right here.
didn't interfere. You were the one who got interfered.
In there. And you were in it. But,
Wait, no, it's, wait.
I'll let
that means you're out. So, Cody, you're out now. Right?
Go to dead.
I'm just referee.
Go dead. Yeah, you're the judge. You make sure people don't cheat. Alex. Alex is, yeah, you're a cheater, Alex. Yes. Oh my gosh. Those are four. That's a bad ball.
That's a CRU reaction time.
But CRU, and you still have a C.
Yep.
You're a bad person just for winning. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
Cody's bad. Oh, interference. Interference. You're out. You lied. Now you're
No, I made it.
suspended. Suspended from class.
You did it last second too. Okay. So it's CR and CRU. CRU for you, Logan.
Oh, CRU for you too.
You never hit it.
Give that dodgeball with me. How about that?
No.
Plastic balls.
Oh, man, look, there's one.
Alright, Logan, go.
Yes.
Don't you dare.
That's a CR for me. It's alright, it's a CRU.
There is no rule that says you're not allowed to CRU.
Logan, killer ping pong just got a whole lot better.
Okay, Logan, come on, let's go.
Just throw the whole ball.
Okay, Logan, go. Logan,
Okay. Oh, man. Come on. You're better than that.
Got it. It is wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
No interference there. So me interfering in the ball.
it's tied. CRU.
Cody. Watch it.
This killer ping pong's the best game in the world.
Yes. Alex, quiet.
Oh! Oh, it stopped.
No,
And it stopped.
that did not stop.
No, I thought you were going again.
This is when it stops. See what?
I don't know how to have a conversation
Well,
anymore.
I'm playing killer ping pong.
Awesome.
Yeah!
Yay, music.
off. You can't slash off.
Yeah.
This one. Go back. Right. So you can't shoot right here. You have to shoot from here. Double strike.
Hey, ping pong. Cody.
Alex is after me. You're after me. Alex is after me.
Yeah, double shot.
First shot.
I'll be like the Michaela. Cody, I can't find any more ammo over here.
Found a Skittle.
Try not to do that.
Yeah.
That's mine. First. Get your here.
Oh, you going back.
That's a C for you.
Cody, you're getting close.
Liam.
I've died myself.
Triple strike. Cody, where you at? Hey, no.
You've done. That's not fair.
Like little yellow Pokeballs. Ah, I hit my hand trying to do that. Can't do this. Cody, no.
I scared Drew. Wow, how did you miss all of those? It was only two. No, there's like 6 of them.
Oh yeah, only 2 plus another 3. Oh my gosh. Okay. I drop my hand and you die. 3, 2, 1. Oh, that was great.
Oh, I kept flipping it over.
Oh my gosh. Scared me to death. Oh, you get a cushion?
Yeah, the cushion's all over the place.
Whoa, that was a bad idea.
And look what I found in the
Candy? Candy or money, I'll take it. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad those. I was about to say I'm so glad those don't hurt until Alex hit me. Arm. Mean. Oh, you're using the big ball. Really? My throne! My throne! Oh! Cody! You're making me whole! Oh my god. Shield! 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 Oi! Oh! My throne of losing! My throne of ultimate failure is failing me. Yeah! Break the power. Everybody move!
That's what Naomi kept doing. That's what Naomi kept doing. She kept shoving me out of the way. Alex! Give me the ball!
Oh man, on my ass! It's a little Pokeball. Alex, you gotta get more of the rival balls. Liam.
Hey, make sure you guys pick up those rival balls when you're done.
Didn't stop.
We're almost done.
No.
Oh, we should start picking them up.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
Okay, there. I'm like, what's up? Look at that! So fancy! Like if you miss that again, that would be oh, come on! And I get hit with like 2 hands and an elbow. Yeah, 2 hands and an elbow. What?
Okay.
Elbow.
We're not gonna criticize you.
Cody. Oh, you're right. You're not winning them. You little baseball man. And you're showing off your fancy little skills. It was ours.
Okay.
Rapid fire straight has been
Okay, I
broken.
thought it was Cody. Alex.
That is not how fire
Oh, what happened?
Slow motion. Oh yeah, look, he's little chuckling.
Go hit it very maturely.
I can't do this.
Oh, this. They have a C, or did we count that? Did we count that?
Watts, the watts.
I'm not. Look, I can literally stand here and when
You got nailed.
Yes, and you're after this. I'm after this. Not really. That was scary.
Ow! I finally did that. I got people on my team giving me ammo. Who you got? You got a paddle.
I don't think we're trying to be on your.
Wait, that's a CR.
I think he's trying to hit you, Logan. I think he's trying to hit you, not me and your team.
Come on. This is the
All
most
of your ammo under the couch.
I win.
Friday night, I was like falling over trying to.
Dang it, that didn't work.
This is good.
It's mine. Come on.
And I accidentally-
Closer. Closer.
You can't get away.
It wasn't your shot yet. You're in the way.
Why
Alex.
did he hit that twice?
Alex, give me some ammo.
Why not?
Thought we were friends here. Yes. I'll just spin in circles until I get dizzy and then I'll throw up on you. Wait, that means, wait, no, Cody, you're out.
No, that's a CR.
Come on.
I am a CR.
Alex, where is the ammo?
I'm trying to see.
Put it.
That's like the best thing ever.
Wait, you like it? Yeah.
That's funny.
There we go.
Now he has a boring life. Alex, I do not.
Oh, someone got the little pink girly ball.
You go that side. Go that side.
3, 2, 1.
He made the other one.
Oh, what?
Don't stop! Oh, I don't think he stopped. I don't think he stopped. You have to catch the ball. You need to get ball and just keep moving. I told you, can't hit me.
Yes, I can. Gotcha! I got you in my mind, and that's enough. Here. Man, Closest one to it. Oh my god. Fine, closest one doesn't have to do it. Break myself trying to do this. In my throne of
I
stupidity.
feel like I should squirt you guys with a squirt gun and make you stop fighting.
I don't need no squirt fun. I'm already wet enough.
I kind of sitting here laughing and can't say anything.
Dang it, second my paddle's gone.
I forgot it was my turn after. I'm not gonna.
Oh yeah, they're bombing. I'm gonna protect you. Oh, I can shoot like that. Yeah. Hey Alex, can I have one of your fingers and I can hit this?
Yes, you may.
Chop it off. You don't need them, right?
I think there's a bump in the table. Or like, drink science.
I need mine. I need all my fingers.
That's why you keep your face out.
CR.
It's like go-kart.
You need an umpire.
Yes! Oh my gosh, we need to get a chair and then find some wheels. Get that one, that one's coming.
And then get like the new other hand. Like take these two chairs and then we can go in the hall. Yeah, I got it, Poppy. Yes. No! Oh, I got hit in the collarbone. No!
That's all been fun.
No, you evil! Alright, no falling on the ball. Yo, Cody,
CR. Where's your paddle? Where's your paddle, boy? No, it's still my throat.
Okay, hello.
Fine. Oh! I win, you lose.
I'm always. No, I always win. Oh yeah.
We can just joust like this.
The people with the red thing. What the? My shot, cheater! No. I took it the wrong way. Would have hit the ball.
Whoopsie. I accidentally touched the ball. Had 3 years to get in it.
You don't even know how to sit down too.
Oh, come on. Don't you touch it. Yeah, back it up on you. Whoa! I'm gonna play Smash Bros. Liam.
No, he doesn't say much. Oh, he just saying.
Alright, everybody, find a seat on the couches!
Psych! Alex! Oh, I still got this thing. Okay. Save this baby for later. Reserved for me. Oh, you didn't crush one? You got a camera. Wow, that's a ton of dogs.
Oh, so you actually have one. Just the one. Alright, if you guys don't have a
Cody.
I forgot you are supposed to put any cheese.
How did you forget that?
Oh, and thanks for the bubbles.
Sure,
I'll get you a Bible. Thank you.
That's you, Christian.
Hey,
Christian, drop it. Haha.
give me a Beeble.
No, he blew on it.
Throw it. You couldn't kill someone.
How would you
No.
put it and then make it
Well.
fall?
Couch for chaos. Couch for chaotic chaos.
I mean, I should. Is this Bible written in Spanish?
Those were the couches of chaos.
Can I actually read it.
Kate, you left the game console going. And the TV on.
Hey.
How could you? How could you? Welcome, we are just getting started. Alrighty, if you have your Bible open to the book of Daniel, you should be able to flip around a little bit and see that there is 12 chapters in the book of Daniel. You guys all there? Round about there? So there is 12 chapters in the book of Daniel. We just finished chapter 6 last week. And chapter 6 is probably the most famous chapter in the book of Daniel. It is the story of Daniel in the lion's den. However, chapter 6 is the end of Daniel's life. Not that he dies, just that that is the latest story we have of events occurring in his life. There'll be one other little prophecy in chapter 12 that happens later, but not a whole lot about his life is told to us in that chapter. So, what we have in Daniel is very odd. We have chapters 1 through 6, the first half of the book, telling his whole life story through the big, amazing, remarkable, noteworthy events of his life, and then chapters 7 through 12, the second half, is his life over again. The timeline restarts, goes backwards in time, and then goes through again with a different topic in mind. So the first half is his life through events happening to him and people around him. The second half is visions that God has given him throughout his life. Now, we already had some visions. Does anybody remember some of the visions from the first half of the book? Yes. Wait, you were already here. You answered this last service. Anybody else?
I wasn't here for the other half of the book of Daniel.
Does anyone remember anything about a statue? Had different kinds of metal in it.
There was the statue of like a man, and then there was the head was like gold.
Mm-hmm.
The chest was silver,
Mhm.
and then the legs and the
There's actually two down here.
The legs were
yeah,
bronze, right?
So the belly and the thighs were bronze,
yeah,
and then the legs were
like a mix of clay and bronze.
iron.
Iron.
Okay, good job. And whose dream vision was it?
It was the king's
Do you remember his name?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar! Well done. Well done. So yeah, chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream from God because he falls asleep wondering about the future. God gives him a dream that explains the future without explaining the dream. He still doesn't get it though. So then he calls in all his guys. They can't answer it. They can't figure it out. Daniel eventually gets called in. He figures it out for him, tells him what the dream means. It explains that the Babylonian kingdom was the one that was current, the gold head. After that was coming the Medo-Persian kingdom. That was the silver chest and arms. After that was coming the Greco-Macedonian Empire. That was the belly and thighs of bronze. And then after that was the Roman Empire. That was the legs of iron. So God actually spells out hundreds of years of the rise and fall of empires through a dream to King Nebuchadnezzar back in chapter 2. There was another vision, though, in the first half of the book. Does anyone remember that vision? It was in chapter 4. Anybody?
I think he might.
He might.
Just
I don't
maybe.
know. It's possible.
Just maybe.
Anybody else? It had something to do with a very tall tree. Do you remember?
It wasn't a lotus tree? Or
No.
that's something
A
else.
lotus
Never
tree.
mentions what kind of tree
Lotus
it was.
plants
Whoops.
are tiny.
There's also lotus trees. It's not even
Yeah.
related. They just have the same name. Yes.
It was a big, like, powerful tree, and all the animals were like around it and like using it for food
And shade.
and shade.
Yeah.
Important things.
Yep.
And then the tree gets chopped off or falls
Yeah, an
down.
angel comes and declares,
Yeah.
the tree's really chopped down.
And then the animals go away and it lives like an animal. Like,
But
like-
now you're crossing over from dream to interpretation. So once again, though, same guy, right? Still Nebuchadnezzar. He has another dream, another vision from God, and it's again telling of the future. This time it's its own personal future. God's giving him a warning at the end of his life. Hey, turn from being prideful, from being selfish, from being evil, or else I'm going to have to teach you to not be prideful, to not be selfish, and to not be evil. So you have a choice, Nebuchadnezzar. You can stop being terrible, or I can teach you to stop being terrible. This is your choice. Daniel has to come and explain the dream again. He still doesn't He doesn't get it. And so God is warning Nebuchadnezzar through the dream, through Daniel, don't be evil or else this will be your punishment. You will lose your sanity. You will find yourself left out to pasture, literally living out in a field with a bunch of wild donkeys, just, covered in dew every night because you have no building, you have no shelter, eating grass like a cow. You're going to stay like this for 7 years. Or you could just stop being mean. Your call. And a year goes by and he does nothing. He doesn't change. He lives exactly the way he's used to living. And sure enough, suddenly his sanity is taken from him. His advisors kind of keep track of him where he's at in the field as time goes by. After the 7 years, he regains his sanity. He has actually learned his lesson. He starts worshiping and praising God. He learns the real lesson God was trying to get across the whole time. Even when you're king of an empire that covers a very large portion of the earth, you're still not in charge of everything. That's the lesson. That's all it was. It was very simple. No matter how on top of things you feel, you're still not actually in control of everything. There's still someone who's in more control than you are, no matter how in control you feel. Nebuchadnezzar did finally learn this lesson 1 year before he died. But he actually got to die of natural causes, which is pretty unheard of for all the kings that come after him. It's a lot of assassinations that come after Nebuchadnezzar. So anyways, we're going to go now past that whole timeline, and we're going to be in from this chapter till the end of the book, vision after vision after vision. And they're in a totally interesting oddball placement. So each vision will slot into somewhere in the timeline we've already read. I know that's a little confusing, but in chapters 1 through 6, we went through most of Daniel's life. And in chapters 7 through 12, we'll go through that same span of time, and so there'll be overlaps. For instance, today we're in chapter 7. That actually fits between, in time, chapters 4 and 5. I'm sorry, it's strange, but that's just how it works. But it breaks the silence. It opens the chapter with that fact. It tells you right when this happens. Chapter 7, verse 1 says, "During the first year of King Belshazzar's reign in Babylon, Daniel had a dream and saw visions as he lay in his bed. He wrote down the dream, and this is what he saw." So, my clicker is not on. That is why it is not clicking. There we go. Come on. Click, click, click. Oh, don't die on me today. Not cool, computer. Oh, of course, Windows 10 has an update. Anyone else been experiencing the horrible pop-up nature of Windows 10?
I didn't get Windows 10. I'm still on Windows 7.
That's what my wife did, and I'm starting to think she was right. All right, here we go. There we go. There's a nice big timeline. There's your whole Old Testament, all the different books of the Old Testament put in chronological order. This is the little tiny time period covered by the book of Daniel. It's mostly the 500s BC with a little bit of the beginning happening at the end of the 600s BC. Daniel, at this point today in chapter 7, he would be 67 years old, and this chapter takes place between the story described in chapter 4 and chapter 5. So chapter 4 is the vision of the tree, Nebuchadnezzar going out to pasture, the end of his life. Chapter 5 is many kings down the line, all the way at Belshazzar, the last of the Babylonian Empire. So there's a pretty big stretch in between, and that's where chapter 7 falls. We figured this out because it mentions this is in the first year of Belshazzar. And Belshazzar takes the throne from his dad somewhere around 3 years into his dad's reign. If you guys don't remember, Nabonidus was a really weird king. He became king and didn't really like being king. So 3 years into being king, he goes off on archaeological expedition after archaeological expedition. He liked unearthing, even more ancient than him, temples to false gods. That was like his thing. That was his jam. He wanted to figure out, this was his mission in life, which of the fake gods was the oldest fake god. So which one has seniority. That was his thing. So he went around unearthing old temples, trying to figure out which temple was built first. And therefore, in his head, which god was greatest. That's how he was judging things. So Nabonidus, he's technically the emperor, the king of Babylon, but he kind of lets his son run things from 553 all the way down to 539. So most of the time that Nabonidus was king, actually Belshazzar was king. Most of that time. It's kind of weird. But that's where chapter 7 takes place, just so you guys have a clue. And this is the vision we're going to look at. It is a weird and crazy vision. A little bit gross at times. Pretty crazy the whole time. Oh, we will look at it in detail. Just you wait. All right, so read with me verse 2 and verse 3. is our intro to the vision. In my vision that night, I, Daniel, saw a great storm churning the surface of a great sea, with strong winds blowing from every direction. Then 4 huge beasts came up out of the water, each different from the others. If you guys know anything about the sea or the ocean, you know that a wind in one direction can cause some pretty big waves. But a wind from multiple directions causes hurricanes. So when he says wind from every direction, that's not necessarily just hyperbole. It's not necessarily just an exaggeration. That's actually what would create a giant storm. It's exactly what it would create.
Is that what that cloud thing?
Yeah, here you go. You got your little hurricane in the background. Remember, the pictures we're looking at today are not from your Bible. They are artists' renditions. They're they use artistic license. And so they did try to capture as many details as they could in the pictures. But I looked and looked and looked. There is no perfect picture. No one gets every detail right. No one gets every single thing right. It's as best as they can do. So anyways, now go ahead and let's peek at verse 4. The first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings. As I watched, its wings were pulled off, and it was left standing with its 2 hind feet on the ground like a human being. And it was given a human mind. Some translations will say a human heart, or the heart of a man. So the first beast, a lion with wings. And in this dream, each thing means something. The wings mean something, and the fact the wings get pulled off means something. It'll all get explained. Everything represents something else. It's not just a weird dream for the sake of having a weird dream. Yes?
That looks like something from Narnia or something.
It's right, doesn't it? All majestic and flying. He's like the only one that doesn't creep me out because he's painted at a distance. You just see less detail, so it's less creepy. All right, and then on to beast number 2. Probably the creepiest. Well, I don't know. Beast 4 is pretty creepy.
The bear with teeth being pulled out.
Oh, no. It's weirder than that. Those are not teeth, I promise you. Check it out. Verse 5. Then I saw a second beast, and it looked like a bear. So it's not a bear. It looks like a bear. It was rearing up on one side, and it had 3 ribs stuck in its mouth between its teeth. And I heard a voice saying to it, "Get up, devour the flesh of many people." All right, now several things to note here. First off, the lion, the bear, they're not lions. They're not bears. It's like a lion. It's like a bear. So Daniel's seeing these creatures shown to him and doesn't really know what to call them because they're weird. And so he just picks the thing they're closest to. So we don't know how much like a bear it looks, how little like a bear it looks, but the closest thing he could think of was a bear. So this is like a weirdy bear. That's just, that's as close you're going to get. Now these are not teeth. These are the 3 ribs mentioned in there in verse 5. And this is weird because if you think about it, you guys have ever eaten ribs?
Nope.
Ribs, barbecue ribs?
Yeah.
Seriously? You never had
I
barbecue ribs?
haven't eaten the ribs.
Ribs are good. You gotta try ribs at least
They're
once.
amazing.
My sister, vegan for many years, the thing she will break for, or now she's not a vegan, so the thing she used to break for every now and then was when my dad made ribs. Because his ribs are that good. But anyways, the point is this. If I eat a rib, I can get rib meat stuck in my teeth. I can't get ribs stuck in my teeth.
Well,
My teeth are smaller than the ribs.
well, maybe it was
If I'm gonna get a rib stuck in my teeth, I gotta have teeth
Like that.
bigger than the ribs. So this gives you some idea of how big the bear is. I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong because I wasn't in the vision, I don't think it's just a normal sized bear with abnormally large teeth. I think that would be weirder, actually, to have like a normal sized bear with, giant buck-toothed rabbit teeth or something, you know what I mean? I think it'd make more sense if this is just a giant bear that has, appropriately gianter than normal teeth. Yeah.
It's like a bear Bigfoot almost. Like
Bigfoots are like the size of a bear, though.
Big 4 feet.
well, but you said that this bear is big.
Big feet.
So it could be as large as a tall building almost. Well, it could be as big as
It's a vision. It could be 1,000 feet tall. It doesn't matter because it doesn't really exist. It's just a vision. It could be eating planets and stars for all I care. It doesn't make a difference. The vision means something. It's not literal. None of this is going to be literal until we get to the end.
Okay.
All right, so we got our bear. He's got his crazy ribs stuck in his crazy teeth. Let's move on.
I'm guessing those are.
Verse 6, we get to the third beast. Then the third of these strange beasts appeared, and it looked like a leopard. It had 4 birds' wings on its back, and it had 4 heads. Great authority was given to this beast. Now remember, the lion had 2 wings. And the wings, as I mentioned, they do represent something. And so likewise, with the leopard, they represent the same thing. But it has more of them. So what does that mean? It has more of the thing it represents. Again, this will all make a bit more sense later. There's an angel that comes up to Daniel and just explains exactly what all this means, what it is there for, what the symbology is. Some of the symbology the angel doesn't explain, and we've had to actually figure out as the prophecies have come true. We're like, oh, well, that just makes so much perfect sense. It's a weird thing we didn't even see it before. Anyways, so yeah, that's verse 6. Very strange leopard-looking creature. Then we get to number 4.
Ooh, that's the weirdest. Cool.
It's probably the weirdest, creepiest one, but that's actually what Daniel says. Check it out. Verse 6. Oh, sorry, verse 7. We already did 6. Then in my vision that night I saw a 4th beast, terrifying, dreadful, and very strong. It devoured and crushed its victims with huge iron teeth and trampled their remains beneath its feet. It was different from any of the other beasts. And it had 10 horns. As I was looking at the horns, suddenly another small horn appeared among them. 3 of the first horns were torn out by the roots to make room for it. This little horn had eyes like human eyes and a mouth that was boasting arrogantly. And so yeah, they make it have a face. And I misinterpreted the drawing when I first looked at it. It kind of looks like he's crying.
He said it was a small horn.
Right? And I looked and looked. I could not find a single artist that did it right, with the talking horn being the smallest. Every picture I could find that someone drew of this, they always make the talking horn the big horn because you have to fit eyes and a mouth on it. So you need more space.
Well, also,
honestly, if you were going to do it right, you'd have like a horn this size so you can fit the face on it. And then the other horns would be like arm-sized horns. You know, these giant appendage-sized horns sticking out.
Maybe they were.
And maybe it was. And maybe the artist just thinks that looks crazy, but it's a crazy dream. So as I said, the pictures are never going to be perfect. They're an artist's rendition. In a lot of the pictures, the artist makes some assumptions that I think are interesting. They try and think of an animal that Daniel would never have seen before. Because Daniel's from Israel and then lives out most of his life in Babylon, he never would have seen a rhinoceros, likely. They're native to Africa, they're native to India. He basically was in the Middle East the whole time, never see a rhino. Other people try other animals he never would have seen, like dinosaurs. Some people paint this one because it has horns as a triceratops. And they just add more horns onto it. So it just has lots of horns. 10. Other people, they'll literally take and just make it a T-Rex because they wanted it to be a T-Rex, and they just stick horns on the T-Rex. But like, it doesn't really matter. He doesn't know an animal that it looks like. That's really what it comes down to. So either A, God picked an animal he doesn't recognize, or B, it's not even a real animal. God made up this beast for this dream. That's possible. That's actually possible.
Well, this beast looks pretty made up to me.
Oh yeah, it's a crazy beast. And I just don't even understand why the horns are so wrinkly. The weirdest horns. They look like
To make it scarier.
What is this?
those little chips.
Bugles.
Bugles. Don't they look like bugles?
First thing I thought.
They
when
even
I saw
look
it.
hollow.
Hungry for you.
It's a little bugle chip.
Wait,
Where's
what
the
about
chili?
tail? The tail. Look at
The
that.
tail?
That
Can't
looks
have
like-
the bugles.
Yeah, that tail is really weird.
That's
Again, it's all just down to the artist. Every artist gets to draw their beast a different way. It doesn't matter. All right, so move on past the beasties. Get down to the next few verses. The vision changes, and I was sad. I couldn't find anyone who tried to paint a picture of this part. I was really sad because it's not the beast. Now we're going to move into another part of the dream that doesn't have beasts. I leave up the beasts just because they don't really talk. They don't have a painting of this part. So anyways, verses 9 through 12 say this. I watched as thrones were put in place, and the Ancient One sat down to judge. His clothing was as white as snow, his hair like purest wool. He sat on a fiery throne with wheels of blazing fire, and a river of fire was pouring out, flowing from his presence. Millions of angels ministered to him, many millions stood to attend him. Then the court began its session, and the books were opened. I continued to watch because I could hear the little horn's boastful speech. I kept watching until the 4th beast was killed, and its body was destroyed by fire. The other 3 beasts had their authority taken from them, but they were allowed to live a while longer. As my vision continued that night, I saw someone like a son of man. We'll go back to that phrase because it's actually very interesting. Coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. I did it again. I wasn't supposed to read verse 13 just yet. So pause with me there. I meant to stop at 12. We're just kind of spilling the beans here. Basically, the dream that Daniel gets mirrors, very interestingly, the statue dream. The statue dream was given to Nebuchadnezzar. He is a king. He's thinking about world empires. He's thinking about his own world empire and what may come after him. God gives him a vision of a statue. And the statue is a view of the empire you're in and the future empires, but it's from a king's perspective. From a king's perspective, an empire is this glorious thing. From a king's perspective, the empire is handcrafted, made by man. It's awesome to behold. It's mighty and it stands tall. These are the same empires represented from the perspective of God, not from the perspective of a king. God looks down and he sees these groups of people rampaging over the earth, flattening everything in their path. And he goes, wow, it's kind of like a wild beast. That's kind of like something that's just, hunting, feral, not really considering or thinking, just going around destroying. There's one exception. That one exception is the Babylonian Empire after it loses its wings. Once it loses its wings, then it says it gets a heart of man or a mind of man, whichever translation you're reading, and it stands up on two legs. And suddenly it all starts to make sense as you start to pick out the details mentioned about these beasts. The Babylonian Empire, under Nebuchadnezzar, its second king, conquered faster than anyone had ever conquered in all of history. And that's what the wings represent. They are the speed at which the empire conquers. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was originally not the king. Originally, he was the general under his father, the king. And he was still the guy doing the conquering. Even when his dad was king, he was the general who led the armies out and conquered everything. So while Nebuchadnezzar was alive, he was conquering with great speed. It only took him a few decades, and he had conquered what to them was the known world. That's impressive. Now, after Nebuchadnezzar stops conquering, that's when the wings come off. And suddenly, after Nebuchadnezzar kind of gets his head right, in a sense, after he goes crazy and then gets his head right later, the kings from then on don't really conquer anymore. They just govern. They manage. They do, what kings are meant to do. So they aren't going out rampaging anymore, and so they stand up. That's that heart of a man. They're not like a beast, feral, conquering, eating, devouring. They stand on their own two legs. But then they're conquered by the Medo-Persian Empire. Now keep in mind, this whole chapter 7, is written, this vision is given during the Babylonian Empire. It was all predicted, all of this was written down in 553 BC. So we're back here in this time span when it's being written, and then we start getting details in the pictures of the following three empires. So first up is Medo-Persia. It has one side raised, rearing up for attack, and the other side's not. And that reflects the dual nature, the dual culture of the Medo-Persian Empire. The Medes were content to be superior and have a nice kingdom. The Persians wanted to conquer and take and control everyone else. And so it's kind of this dualistic attitude. Half the kingdom doesn't care, half the kingdom wants to destroy. And so the bear is raised up on one side. Likewise, the bear in this culture, in this part of the world, was thought to be an animal that was more cruel than the other predators. Now, this is kind of a misinterpretation of bears' actions. People didn't understand zoology that well back then. This is kind of how their thinking went. If you're running from a lion and you get to your house and slam the door, the lion goes, oh man, where'd they go? Oh well.
A bear rams through the door.
A bear comes up and goes, oh, that door opens. I'm going to knock down that door. And the bear knocks down the door and gets inside. You lock something up in a box, the bear opens the box. You hide something in a tree, the bear climbs the tree. So people viewed the bears as being cruel, when that's not really the reality.
They're smarter.
They're intelligent. So the picture here is not meant to make him look intelligent. This is confirmed by the ribs still sticking in his teeth. This means the bear is conquering places so fast, it doesn't even care that, well, I only half conquered you. I'm just going to keep on conquering. It still has nations stuck in its teeth, and it just keeps going leveling everything else. And this was true of the Medo-Persian Empire. They would fight a battle, half conquer a country, and go, yeah, we'll probably get him someday. And then just keep going and take over another country. And then eventually their armies would slowly but surely conquer the other countries. And they just swept across land faster than they were even able to keep up with themselves. And they were cruel. History actually teaches us that the way the Babylonians treated religion and persecution of people of other religions is very different from how the Persians treated religions and the persecution of people of other religions. The Babylonians said, you can keep your religion, you just have to put ours top. You have to worship our God first, then you can worship your God. The Persians said, worship our God or die. Don't worship your God. Don't you dare worship your God. Which is what makes it all the more remarkable, the stories earlier in Daniel, that the Persians are actually the ones that respected Daniel's God, the God of the Bible. The Persians are actually the ones who let the Israelites go.
So is this during Cyrus's reign?
So Cyrus is the first king of the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay. So yeah, the bear is during Cyrus, but it's all being written back here before Cyrus. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So then you get on to the next beast, the Greco-Macedonian Empire. This is where some of the details really start to lock in hard. You've got a four-headed leopard with four wings. Now remember, the wings represented what?
Conquer.
What did the wings represent?
Oh wait.
How fast you conquer.
How fast you conquer. It's that conquering speed. Yeah.
Since it's four wings, does that mean they conquered like faster than the Babylonians?
You nailed it, Cade. So the Greco-Macedonian Empire starts with Alexander the Great. He conquers everything Persia had and a little bit more in 6 years. That's like insane. It took decades for everyone else to do their conquering. He does it in 6 years. That's nuts. And so yeah, that's the four wings. He's like twice as fast, at least in the way we're comparing these visions. But then there's these four heads on the leopard, and this is again indicative of the Greco-Macedonian Empire. Under Alexander the Great, during those first few years, there was the one ruler, the one head. But as soon as he dies, boom, empire splits. And not in half, not into 3 parts, into 4 parts. It exactly splits into 4 parts. The 4 generals that were under Alexander the Great each take over 1/4 of the original empire. And so, yeah, the 4 heads represent those 4 generals. Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been better if they had, if he made the vision so that it was, the leopard had 1 head and then it split into
It
4?
grew 4 heads. Interesting you should say that. Read chapter 8 before we get back next week. You'll see he basically does that. All right. So, leopard represents the Greco-Macedonian Empire, how fast they conquer, how many generals take over the kingdom afterwards. And then we get to the final one. This one is argued about slightly because there's more than one thing that fits pretty well with the actual prophecy. But this is not uncommon. We're going to talk a little bit later about a near and far fulfillment. Has anyone here ever heard of prophecies having a near and a far fulfillment? Earlier this morning. Yeah. Did you? Have you?
Think so.
Think so? Okay. We'll talk about it more today. Anyways, that's your overview. Roman Empire, we'll get into that more as we talk about the near and far fulfillment. But essentially, they were different from all the prior empires. And they lasted a heck of a lot longer than all the prior empires. All right. Move on. Let's read verses 13 through 18, and we will see things come to a head. As my vision continued that night, I saw someone... Oh, we read 13. Let's read it over. I saw someone like a son of man. Coming with the clouds of heaven, he approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. He was given authority, honor, and sovereignty over all the nations of the world, so that people of every race and nation and language would obey him. His rule is eternal. It will never end. His kingdom will never be destroyed. I, Daniel, was troubled by all I had seen, and my visions terrified me. So I approached one of those standing beside the throne and asked him what it all meant. He explained it to me like this. These 4 huge beasts represent 4 kingdoms that will arise from the earth. But in the end, the holy people of the Most High will be given the kingdom, and they will rule forever and ever. Now this is interesting. Not only does the angel just explain, what I just said, but he does it in the most basic, simple, undetailed, uncomplex way he possibly could. So Daniel sees this crazy, ridiculous vision, all these beasts, all these little details he's noticing, these little nuances that are in the vision, and he's just weirded out by it, freaked out by it, scared by it. He goes to ask about it, and the angel says, oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's just a bunch of kingdoms that are coming, but in the end, God wins. That's kind of his explanation. Like, he could have sat there and said, well, you know, the leopard has 4 heads because there'll be 4 generals. And he could have explained all this. No, he just says, it's kingdoms, and God wins. Somehow to the angel, that's kind of the big point. Not this bad thing, and then that bad thing, and then that bad thing, and then a really bad thing.
And then the horn talks.
And then the horn starts talking. How creepy is that? No, he's just like, oh yeah, and God wins in the end. That's the big point to him. Interesting. Oh yeah, we didn't talk about Son of Man. We gotta talk about Son of Man. All right, so guys, see that phrase up there, Son of Man. I'll give you the answer, and then I'll see if you guys can guess at the why that's the answer. Son of Man, all throughout the Bible, is a nickname, a code name, if you will, for Jesus.
Oh, I thought that was a question. Never mind.
No, I'm giving you the answer. Now the question is, why? Why is that a nickname for Jesus? Think about the phrase for a second. Okay, who here's a guy? Anyone here a boy, a male, a man? Is it guy? Okay. There's a few of you guys. Oh, some of you guys are not listening. Ooh. Poor tired boys. All right. Yeah, quite a few of us, about half, right? Okay, so here's my question. All you guys, did you have a father? Did you guys have a dad? Yeah?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And was he a man?
Yes, it was.
All right, so pretty much half the population could say, did you mean me? I'm a son of a man. This is a really vague nickname, isn't it? Like, why would they pick this nickname for Jesus when, like, aren't we all, us guys at least, aren't we all a son of a man? I mean, come on, that's like the most vague, unspecific name you could ever have.
Wait, if you say you're
That's like naming your son Guy.
Well, that's the thing. If you're a son of man,
Hello,
that means
guy.
I know
son
people
of
named
man.
Guy, but my
Not
point is,
specifically saying who.
you're naming someone a word that means a dude. That's just weird.
Saying son of man.
Yes.
Specifically
I think that he was called Son of Man because, for one reason, is God is considered as like a man, kind of. And when he came down, he was actually below him because Jesus is still perfect in every way. God is too, but so far Jesus was kind of mortal down there. He wanted to be immortal, so he was basically a son of a man. And plus the Trinity, God, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Well, but that would make his father human, which isn't quite the case. But you're getting close. You're very close. Those are all good things. Anyone else have any other guesses? Yeah. So the question, just to remind you guys, why would this name, Son of Man, be used as a nickname or a code name for Jesus?
I think Christian's got it.
No, don't call
Always
him.
got it.
Don't
Feel
call
that.
him.
Christian was here last service. Why would I call him?
Okay, then Cody.
He's heard everyone's answer
Cody's
and
got
my
it.
answer. Yeah.
Because when he came down, he would his. Oh wait, no, never mind. My answer. His father wasn't Joseph.
Well,
He wasn't
Debatable.
born by Joseph.
that's true. That is true. He was raised by him. Okay, so here's the
So-
interesting thing. The word man in this phrase means human, not male. Son means male. But the man word in this phrase is not man meaning male, it's man meaning human.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? Like mankind? That's
Yeah.
not like not the ladies. That just means all the humans.
So when he came down, he became a human, but he's like the human, the Son of Man, the best, perfect one.
Okay, that's not bad. Yes.
I think he was called Son of Man because they were specifying the fact that he gave up heaven and gave up staying with God for that many years to save us.
Interesting.
So he was
Totally
considered Son of Man.
true. Now I have a secondary question. Unless you had one more answer. Did you have one more? Oh, okay. Your hand was actually up a little a second ago. I swear it was. All right. One more little add-on question to this. Now you got to think, because you guys are all getting really close here. You're all doing really good. Why would Daniel, the author of this book, think to call him Son of Man? Because remember, this guy, Daniel, the guy who wrote this book, who's seeing this vision, he's pre-Jesus coming to the earth. By several hundred years. By over 500 years. He's before Jesus came to the planet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So 550-ish years before Jesus came to the earth, lived as a man, sinless, died, rose from the dead. Before all that, 500 and a half years or so, Daniel saw this vision and said this, called him the Son of Man. Okay, think about this for a second. Think about the context of the vision. Okay, let's paint the picture here. That's my baby. She's over there, sad. All right. So think about this for a second. Okay, Daniel's having his vision. He's watching these beasts one by one come up out of the sea, rampage, pillage, destroy. Okay, beast 1, beast 2, beast 3, beast 4. And then the dream mentions he sees thrones being set up, millions and millions of angels. Where is he? Think about this, guys. He's having a vision, but where is he that he can see the whole earth being destroyed by these beasts? And then he looks up and sees that there's all these angels and there's God on his throne. Where is he at in his vision?
Wouldn't God give him the vision?
That's not my question. Yes, God gave him the vision.
Yes, I know that.
The question is, where is he in the vision? Physically, where is he at?
Heaven.
Huh? Heaven. He's in heaven. Think about this, guys. He's able to see the whole earth being destroyed by these giant, ridiculous monsters. And then he notices that there's millions of angels. If he had moved from point A to point B, if he was on the earth watching the beasts and then he noticed a bunch of angels, he would have written, and suddenly I was taken up to heaven. There'd be a huge transition. But instead he just like, oh, and there was a bunch of angels. So it's almost like he's looking down the earth and then realizes like, oh gosh, there's a lot happening here too. This is the other thing we got to get in our heads. Whenever we talk about heaven, we somehow have this picture in our head of angels based on artists' rendition. And there's a problem with that. Most of the times in the Bible where we see angels and they're visually described for us as this is what they look like, they're on earth. They're not in heaven. There's only a few places in the Bible where we see angels visually described for us in heaven. And here's the fun fact. They don't look the same in heaven as they do on earth. On earth, they kind of dress up like humans. They look like humans, except bigger, stronger, and they glow. A little weird.
Right.
But I mean, like that's the notable difference. When they see an angel and they're on earth, they're like, whoa, it is a man of mighty stature, and he's glowing all over the place. That's what they describe an angel as when they're here. When they go to heaven, when someone's given a vision of heaven and they actually describe to you what the angel looks like, they do not look human. They do not. They sometimes have multiple faces. They sometimes have multiple wings. They sometimes can see out of every side of themselves. Like, they don't have a blind spot. Okay? This is how they're described when they're in heaven. So here's my point. You're in heaven, you're surrounded by millions of angels, and there's God on his throne, and suddenly you see someone who looks human? That would stick out like a sore thumb.
Well, yeah, because he's glowing.
Not the point. You're in heaven. The glory of God is off to one side. Everything's glowing, okay? No, what's different is when someone walks in the room and he looks like you. Everything else here does not look like you. But when the one guy walks in that looks like you, that's what you notice him by. That's how you describe him. You call him the Son of Man. Look, that guy's kind of almost human.
Not
Huh.
even close. Not even.
Well, it's still Jesus. He's still in heaven. He's still going to have glory.
No human.
So he's not going to be like a normal, average, boring human. He's just going to look a lot more like a human than all these angels, than God. So yeah, Jesus walks through and he calls him the Son of Man. There's another side to this name, though. Not just Daniel's own personal experience here in the dream. Son of Man is a term that harkens forwards and backwards to the first mentions of God's plan for the gospel, and then the actual things that Jesus does for the gospel. And you guys picked out the stuff Jesus does for the gospel, no problem. He has to become like us. He has to become one of us in order that his death would count for us. And so yeah, he does allow himself to become human, Son of Man. Interestingly though, this is what was prophesied all the way back in the first few chapters of the Bible. God's talking to Adam and Eve right after they sin. He also, in that moment, not all of us remember the story this well, but he reprimands Satan. Because remember, Satan is the one who tempted Eve. And so he reprimands Satan and he says, hey, a curse on you too. You didn't commit this sin, but you tempted them to sin. And so you're going to get a punishment too. Here's the deal, Satan. You're going to try and bite humanity's heel. You're going to be antagonizing humanity again and again and again and again. But there will come a day when a descendant of Eve, a human, is going to crush your head with that heel.
Yay!
Awesome.
That's the punishment. That's the curse. That's what's told to Satan. And the way he says it is this phrase, that a son of mankind, humankind, a human is the one who's going to do it, which seems weird when we're like, well, yeah, Jesus is the one who fulfills the prophecy. Well, guess what? Jesus became human. So it all fits in. So from the very, very, very beginning, the plan was God's got to become human. That's all part of the original plan. Daniel still hasn't seen it happen yet. Daniel, like I said, still 550 some odd years before Jesus dies on the cross. And he is seeing this vision, and it's a very interesting thing. It's almost like the way God sees time. It's all out in front of him, easy to look at all of it at once. Because what Daniel's looking at is the empire he's living in. The empire that will come next, he'll just live for the first few years of. The empire after that, he'll never get to see. The empire after that will last hundreds and hundreds of years. And the end of the world when God starts judging everything. It's all laid out for him in one scene. Thousands of years in one dream. And in the dream, almost no time passes at all. He says that all four beasts come up out of the water just about at the same time. Bloop, 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 bloop. Is that too many bloops? Bloop, 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 bloop. Yeah, it was too many bloops. They all pop up out of the water. They all rampage all over the earth. God calls down judgment, and everything's good after that. His kingdom reigns forever after that. But he just sees it all in one go. This is how God sees time. He talks about time in a very different way from we do. All right, go to the next verse with me. Verses 19 through 22. Daniel's got some questions.
Oh, you got some questions?
No, not me. New people, just so you know, my name is also Daniel. I hope that's not confusing from this point on. All right. Verse 19. Then I wanted to know the true meaning of the fourth beast, the one so different from the others and so terrifying. It had devoured and crushed its victims with iron teeth and bronze claws, trampling the remains beneath its feet. I also asked about the 10 horns on the fourth beast's head and the little horn that came up afterwards and destroyed 3 of the other horns. This horn had seemed greater than the others, and it had human eyes and a mouth that was boasting arrogantly. Now, he might sound like he's repeating himself, but he gets something new on the page here for us, right here, verse 21. As I watched, this horn was waging war against God's holy people and was defeating them, until the Ancient One, the Most High, came and judged in favor of his holy people. Then the time arrived for the holy people to take over the kingdom. All right, so he asks more details, and he gives more details. Yeah.
Oh, I'm like this just came into mind. You probably know why they made it large on the whatever thing head, because like they wouldn't make sense because it's small and wouldn't like push out all 3 of them. So they probably made it large.
Truthfully, you wouldn't have to be the full footprint of 3 horns.
So
to
they
push
wouldn't
out 3
make.
horns.
So you wouldn't be sitting down and say, that makes no sense.
Anyone who's had dental trouble knows you can have a small tooth come in and push out
Yeah.
2 teeth. But I'm just saying, like, you're right. It obviously is hard for the artist to figure out how to draw it. But yeah, you could just have 3 horns close together. Or how can I do that with my fingers? And then one horn pushes through the
I'm
center
making
of all 3,
Um,
and then like they lose their root, they fall out. Whatever. It's not important exactly how it works, because remember, it's a picture. It's not reality. It's not like there's actually a beast with 10 horns and actually a new horn coming out and actually a horn with eyeballs and a mouth on it. That would be weird, and I would be scared too. It's just a vision. It just is representative of things. It's not real.
Yeah, but sometimes
Okay.
dreams can feel like dreams and nightmares can feel like real life.
Oh yeah, wait till we get to the last verse. Daniel definitely was having a hard time with these dreams. The last verse describes just how hard it was to go through this. His heart was pounding. He was pale in the face. It was not fun times. All right, so he does mention something new here. He says that this little horn was specific in that it was waging war against who?
Germany. No.
God's holy people.
God's holy people. Okay, so sure. Now that actually is a part of the Roman
Yeah, it is.
Empire, so it's a valid mention, but no, not quite. All right, so take a peek here. We have several interpretations of this fourth beast, and it's 10 horns. Some people say it's 1/4 of the Greco-Macedonian Empire. Remember how I said it broke up in 4 generals? One general each got 1/4 of the empire. There was 1/4 that encompassed Israel, the people who are, the family of the guy who wrote this book. And that quarter did have 10 successive kings, but that kind of falls apart after that. The 10th king did not conquer 3 kings to get his spot. They're all successors of one another, so it's like he only needed to conquer 1 king to get his spot. It's not a good matchup. But there's some other fun things there. Rome is a much better matchup. Rome fits. And check out verses 23 and 24. It kind of explains this as the angel starts to answer. Yes?
Is that Asia to the right?
Now, this is what Roman Empire called Asia. This is not what we call Asia.
Okay.
Okay. Well, this is now what we call Asia Minor, just to keep it straight in our heads. But they didn't call it Asia Minor. They just called it Asia.
Yeah, I'm just like, okay, I think some...
Yeah, no, there's a total mistake there. It's kind of like how people sailed to America and thought they were going to hit India. Like, they just didn't get their maps
Like if
very
they
well.
hit Antarctica, they hit
To,
Alaska.
put it this way, to the Romans, this was the Far East. Does that kind of make sense? Like, they didn't really get that the map kept going a really long way further east. They just thought that was the Far East. So, anyways, not really the point. Yeah, different Asias.
That's just weird because I'm like, Asia down there? Wait, where that, what? From right now, where would that be?
This is Turkey.
Wait, how is that Turkey? Wait.
That's Greek. That's Greece right over there.
Yes.
And then you go up here,
Yes.
and this is Turkey.
Yes.
Oh wait.
Oh, that's a chicken.
That's a chicken.
Turkeys are.
I'm Scott.
Oh.
Turkeys are annoying.
I came across some wild turkeys one time. I felt like I came across a herd of raptors. They were just like, they were not okay with me, and they were like trying to surround us. Like, it's not fun.
My dad one time we were taking some turkey chicks.
Very strange. Okay, guys, let's check out the angel's answer here. Remember, Daniel asked us questions about the little horn, about the fourth beast, and all that stuff. So now the angel's going to answer. Check it out. Verse 23 and 24. Then he said to me, this fourth beast is the fourth world power that will rule the earth. It will be different from all the others. It will devour the whole world, trampling and crushing everything in its path. Its 10 horns are 10 kings who will rule. Its 10 horns are 10 kings who will rule that empire. Then another king will arise, different from the other 10, who will subdue 3 of them. He will defy the most... Oh, wait. Rewind, sorry. So verse 24, and that's where we're supposed to stop. So this is one divvy-up map of the Roman Empire. And the problem with divvying up the Roman Empire into any segments is that they were adding things to their empire almost the whole time they existed, right up until they started falling apart. And so depending on what time period you pause the Roman Empire map at, you'll get different numbers of segments, different numbers of places. So the only way to figure out this vision and how it might map up is to take the places by their names at the point in history that Daniel is writing this, rather than trying to pick which segment of the Roman Empire to pause on. So these are the segments that were contained in the Roman Empire, but divvied up as they would have been pre-Roman Empire. Once you get into the Roman Empire like electing governors. Oh my gosh, they like electing governors. So this same piece of land could have been divvied up into as many as 50 places. Once you get into later portions in Roman history, it gets ridiculous. So, interestingly enough, in history though, towards the end of the Roman Empire, 3 places were conquered and added to one kingdom. Greece, Asia, and Egypt were all conquered and added to Turkey. Oddly enough, the Turkish Empire arose, or the Ottoman Empire as it's sometimes called. Read that with me in verse 25. He will defy the Most High and oppress the holy people of the Most High. He will try to change their sacred festivals and laws, and they will be placed under his control for a time, times, and half a time. That is a poetic way of saying 3.5 years. A time, that's 1 year. Times, that's 2 years. And a half a time, that's half a year. So add it all together, you get 3.5 years. this is important because this locks in with other Bible prophecies that talk about the end times. And 3.5 years is a very important measure of time in the end times. It's just how everything's structured. All right, let's try and make this a little simple. Near and far fulfillment.
Well, why?
In prophecy, God has a habit of giving the future like we saw today. Pictures, symbols, dreamscapes that go from the mundane to the strange. And sometimes he'll explain in great detail, or sometimes, like today, he explains with very little detail. And we only really know half of what I'm telling you, not from chapter 7, but from actually finishing the book of Daniel and getting all of the other visions that Daniel gets, adding them together, figuring out what the details add up to. That said, what we see pretty common in this is that there is actually a reason for God to do pictures and to not just do what some of us prefer. Can you imagine if God just like calls you up one day and says, "Hey, Alex, how's it going? Hey, so I want to tell you about next week. It's like a leopard.
Okay.
It's like a leopard. And the week after that's going to be like a beast.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right, have a good one, Alex."
Yeah,
Can
I'll
I
talk
go?
to you later,
Can
John.
I go with you?
And Alex is just sitting there going,
I want to come to heaven with you.
"I don't even know what to think anymore." We'd so much prefer it if God just called us up and was like, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, next week it's gonna rain. You should have an umbrella with you."
I don't want an umbrella.
You're like, "Oh, okay. Oh, and don't get in the car on Thursday.
A tree's gonna fall.
It'll crash." You're like, "Oh, well, that's good to know. I guess I won't get in the car on Thursday." "Oh, and 2 weeks from now, your house will blow up. Take a vacation." It's like, thanks God, that's great. And you hang up the phone, you're like, "Mom, Thursday we're going nowhere, but Friday we're leaving town, okay?" Like, you would get a message from God with all those details and just go, "Wow, that's amazing. I'll do exactly
My
that."
mom would.
You know what?
But here's the interesting thing. God doesn't just say next week's like a leopard. He actually gives details. He does give some
So, like,
explanation.
what kind of detail exactly? Like,
Well, as we keep going in the next few chapters, you'll see the details get pretty thick. He actually starts to give a lot of
I was kind
detail
of thinking like
as
they're
time
vague.
goes
It's a
on.
line with 4 heads or 3 heads or whatever.
No, that's like the vision we got today. Today's one of the most vague ones. Now, what's interesting, though, is in God's vagueness, in his lack of detail, he pulls off an amazing feat. He can have the same prophecy come true multiple times. And each time it comes true, it comes more true. What? All right, who heard me? Raise your hand. What did I say? What did I say?
Each time.
Each time something.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right, boys, listen up. This is very, very crucial. Stop doing what you're doing.
That's what he said.
I'll give you a hint. Cave has a pencil. That's all.
Shush, 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 shush. You're doing it again.
I need a piece
Okay.
of paper.
Oh, that's good right there. I got scratch paper doing it.
Oh, you do? Whew. Okay. Ciao.
All right, I'll say it one more time. You guys actually listening this time?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I know what you said.
No, you
listen one
don't.
more time.
Ouch.
Do you want to try? Go for it. What did I say?
I forgot what was good.
Alex, don't be fibbing to me. All right, here's the deal. God's visions are just vague enough, exactly as vague as they need to be, so they can pull off a really cool feat. They can come true multiple times, and each time they come true, they are more true than the last time. That's kind of crazy. So, in this Rome one, it doesn't come true once. As far as I can tell, it comes true 3 times. 3 times this fourth beast with 10 horns comes true. Each time fulfilling a little more of the prophecy. First time, only barely does it make sense and barely fit the prophecy. So the first time is one of the final guys who rules one of the quarters of Alexander the Great's kingdoms. His name was Antiochus Epiphanes. He is the one who rules the Antiochus Epiphanes. It's 2 names. Antiochus Epiphanes.
Say that one more time.
Antiochus Epiphanes rules the segment of Alexander the Great's kingdom that's over here on this side. And that segment includes Israel. He goes into Israel. He says, "You guys can't worship your God anymore." He makes a really bad sacrifice on the altar. And then the temple gets destroyed. This is bad. He does this, and while doing so, fulfills several of the key things explained here in chapter 7, but not all of them. Then we fast forward, and we get to the part with the Romans. The Roman Empire has this whole 10 and 3 thing happening. That's all well and good. But really what goes on here is that God's people are persecuted, just like with Antiochus Epiphanes. Early on in the Roman Empire, you have Caesar Nero. Caesar Nero starts persecuting Christians. He then commits suicide. And right after that, the persecution of Christians spreads to become the persecution of anyone who worships the true God, Christians and now also Jews. Both. Because the Roman world thought that Christianity was a Jewish thing only, they thought, let's kill the Jews too, let's get rid of the Jews, let's crush the Jews. So they go in, they crush the capital city, try and curb any sort of uprising, religious or otherwise, and they destroy the temple in the process. Once again, putting a stop to the worship of God, as they thought. But again, that's not all that's in the vision. It's not like the horn wins the end. The vision is the horn keeps on killing God's people, and then God judges. And this is what's so interesting. The vision is fulfilled a little bit more this time, because the punishment isn't just your empire's over and a new empire comes in. The punishment this time is the Roman Empire dissolves and eventually becomes a Christian empire, and then eventually isn't even an empire anymore. And Christianity just keeps on going. It's not slowed down by the fact that the Roman Empire dissolves and stops being an empire. So that even more fits the prophecy here in chapter 7. But then Revelation gives us the third fulfillment. It tells us about our future. That one day there will be another fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7. And then there will actually be another world-encompassing empire. It's going to have 10 horns, and one horn will pop up and conquer the 3. And in Revelation, that horn, the little horn that's pompous and arrogant, is called the Antichrist. And so when we're learning about the end times, as you go through Revelation and other books that teach about the end times, you actually have to come back and look at Daniel if you want some of the details.
Wait, does that tie into the Roman Empire, the Antichrist? Because it was...
A bit, yes, it does. Not necessarily in name, however. The idea is that when you link up, say, the first fulfillment and the second fulfillment, the parallels are not necessarily that they're called the Roman Empire. That's not the parallel, because the beast isn't named Roman here in the book. The parallels are how the empire is structured, how it behaves, the way it goes after people. So it's whatever attributes are described are the things that will remain the same. Everything else can change. So in the end times, there will be some sort of world power, and it will eventually have one horn that's louder than all the rest, that leads more than the other ones lead, the Antichrist. It doesn't necessarily mean the empire that rises up in the end times will be called the Roman Empire. That's because the name isn't given, that shouldn't be the same. It wouldn't make sense if it was the same, because the first two fulfillments, the name wasn't the same. Yeah.
Paul was a Roman, right?
Paul was Roman on his dad's side. He was Jewish on his mom's side. So he was both. Yeah. Alrighty. So, move on with me. We are almost done here, I promise. Verses 26 through 28. Let's finish this chapter. But then the court will pass judgment, and all his power will be taken away and completely destroyed. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be given to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will last forever, and all rulers will serve and obey him. That was the end of my vision. I, Daniel, was terrified by my thoughts, and my face was pale with fear, and I kept these things to myself. See, that's the kind of thing I said, stop! Don't do that! We're in the middle of reading and you're making a joke. Mid-sentence, come on. It was mid-sentence, it was a comma, I swear. Alright. Alright, anyways, finish this up. Here's the deal. When God talks about his kingdom, more specifically, when Jesus was here on the earth and he was talking about God's kingdom, he did some really interesting explaining. First off, we know that God's kingdom is going to surpass all other kingdoms. As big as these empires were, as much as they thought they controlled the entire world, they never actually did. They never actually did. They covered huge sections of the earth. They conquered, all the governments they had heard of. But, go over the Himalayas, there was a few more governments going on. They never got to those. Go over to the other continents, there was a few other governments going on. They never got to those. So, no, they didn't control the whole earth. They just thought they did. God's kingdom is actually going to cover the whole earth. But also, we got to keep in mind this whole Bible prophecy near and far fulfillment, because if we don't, then we start to think about what we read today as only historical. It's only old stuff. It's only stuff that's already happened. And that's not the case. This is both. It's mentioning things that were in their near future, and it's mentioning things that are so far in the future, it's still in our future. Now, I don't know how far in the future, because we've already got the place on the planet, that map I showed you guys earlier with, like Spain and France and all those places. That map is interesting to me because it's almost the same as the current map of the EU. The current map of the EU has, several countries all in that same area of the world, all linked up together. And if they became bigger or more militant, or a single ruler rose up and said, we're going to take over the world, or something, that could have been the warning sign we were supposed to be looking for. I don't know. We'll see as time goes on. Time will tell. But what we do know is that there will be a one world power, as described in Revelation. There will be all these countries coming together and putting all their allegiance in one place, and there will be a leader who rises up to take control of that. When it happens, I don't know. That part's not written down for us. That part's not described for us. Just the order. This, then this, then this, then this. And that really is the most important part, is that God's kingdom is already here and already growing. This is the way that Jesus talked about God's kingdom every time he talked about it, that it was starting with him when he came here the first time. That was the opening act, the beginning of God's kingdom. And that it was just going to keep growing and getting stronger as time goes on, and the world was going to keep on getting more and more evil as time goes on, and that the kingdom of God and the kingdom of the world were going to butt heads more and more as time goes on. As Christianity grows and as the world gets worse, the two will become more and more different from each other until they can't get along, and then the end times happen, and massive wars happen, and religious purging happens, and it's going to be terrible. But that's not the end, and that's the cool part about this chapter. Daniel's chapter does not finish with, and everybody dies. That's not the ending. Daniel's chapter his book doesn't end with, and the scary rhinoceros beast flattens the earth. The end. That's not how it goes. It's that the beasts are rampaging, and God is waiting for the right moment to step in and go, okay, now you're done. Now you are finished. Now you're conquered. You're over. Now my kingdom gets to start. Perfection gets to start working its way back into the earth. And all the evil is going to get kicked out. That's the real message here. And that's what's interesting. Daniel says he keeps this, he hides it in his heart. That's the other translation for, I kept these things to myself. But he doesn't. Long term, that was a short term. Short term, he kept it to himself. Long term, he wrote a book about it. That's not keeping it to yourself. That's not, those are two opposites. So long term, he actually wanted to share this with his countrymen. He wanted to share this with the Israelites. He wanted them to read this. Not because he's like, oh yeah, it's going to suck.
Wait, no.
That wasn't the reason he wrote the book. Yeah, life is going to get worse. No, life is going to be hard, and then God wins. That's the message. Life is going to be hard, and then God wins. And so that's really the message here. That when God planted a seed here on this earth through Christ's work at the cross, he also made a promise that one day he's going to return to harvest the fruit of his work. And so although the Christian kingdom, or really it's God's kingdom with Christians in it, although that's here right now and it's growing right now in our hearts, one day it's going to be tangible. One day it's going to be a thing that everyone can look up and see. One day it's going to be here on this planet, with God here on this planet ruling. One day. It's going to be neat. We're going to be there to see it. Whether we live to see it, or whether we die and he has to resurrect us so we can see it, doesn't matter. We're still going to get to be there and see it. That's really cool. All right, and that's it for today.
Oh, wow.
Read your Bibles. Check out chapter 8 if you're curious about some of where those, or where some of those details come from.
Revelations.
Or read the Revelations. Revelations, actually, it's singular. Revelation. The full title is The Revelation of Jesus Christ.
Revelation of Jesus. Okay.
So it's singular, not Revelations.
Revelations.
Some people think that Revelation is the whole title, and then it doesn't make any sense because there's multiple revelations within the book.
Yeah.
But that's not the full title. It's The Revelation of Jesus Christ. Anyways, the point is, you could read Revelation and you'll actually see there's a lot of tie-ins and references back to Daniel, chapter 7, but also other chapters as well. Let's pray. Lord, I want to thank you for your book, Daniel. I want to thank you that you don't just leave the future a mystery, that you actually tell it to us. You explain it to us, and you do it in a way that helps us to see you, to see your perspective on things. You don't just describe current events and future events, Lord. You show us how you see those events, how people warring and fighting against each other are like beasts who don't really have intelligence. They're just rampaging around, destroying things. Lord, thank you that you've shared that part of your heart with us. Help us to see things your way. Help us to have hope and to draw it from the fact that you're going to win one day and there'll be no more wars. There'll be no more fighting. Help us to look forward to that day. Give us strength and hope in its coming. We ask all these things in your name, Jesus. Amen. All right, quick announcement. Friday is a girls' sleepover / Nerf night. If you like sleepovers, come on Friday. If you like shooting Nerf guns, come on Friday. $5 to get in the door. We'll have tons of snacks for you. Bring a Nerf gun if you have them. Borrow a Nerf gun if you don't. If you can't even get one, we'll give you a blowgun. They're more accurate and they shoot further than the regular.
And you can fit 13 darts in it.
Sometimes, yes. Yes.
So great.
Yes. Actually, the title written in this book is written by man. The title from most books is the opening line of the book. This is a revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the events that must soon take place. That is technically the opening line. The title didn't exist back when it was written. It just sat there with that first line on the top of the page. So that's what it was referred to for a long time.
Fine, it's fluff.
Eventually, people started referring to it as the revelation of the Apostle John. But that was not its original title. That was a later title. I'm sorry, did someone say the camera was cool? Because I think that's funny. Because it's actually a cool pic.
Yeah, he was probably like,
Christian, are you serious?
I'm serious, okay?
yeah,
Alright, calling it. This guy wins.
Yes, you
This guy
finally
wins.
won.
Because
kill the guy. He's king.
when it fell, right, you get one free thing.
I was so close for going 2 for 2, Daniel. Next week, baby.
Next week.
This is my vacation.
I love you guys. I will see you later. Girls, I apologize for no flyer today, but check the website. Nerf Night details will be on the website, ccchico.com.
Really quick game of nothing.